But I do think of the expression that luck is opportunity meets hard work. So I think if you put in the hours and you're prepared and you're knowledgeable, you treat people well, then yes, opportunities come up and it feels like you just got lucky.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're all having an amazing day today. My name is Dalal, and you are listening to the Popcorn and Soda Podcast, the show where we discuss all things movies, pop culture, and so much more. I want to thank each and every one of you for making me a small part of your day. On today's show, we are joined by a very special guest. You know him as one of the top sports broadcasters in the world today on DAZN, a lifelong movie fan, but most importantly, a real trailblazer for Muslims and people of color in this medium, Mr. Adnan Virk. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dalal. Thanks so much for the introduction, man. It is a pleasure to be, like you said, repping the community. And, listen, it's been a tough time for Muslims the last few years. It's certainly a tough time for South Asians. We know that people can denigrate us and certainly focus on those who are not representative of our community. But I'm thrilled to be with you. I'm thrilled to see other South Asians doing things in media. I'm sure with our backgrounds both being Pakistani, I'm sure our families weren't always 100% supportive, would have preferred the lawyer, doctor, engineer route, movies,
Of course.
journalism, sports. Probably not the best, but I'm sure you, like me, do have loving families. And it's a big part of Pakistani culture, South Asian culture. We always have big families, very loving families. So I appreciate the kind words, man. I don't know about Trailblazer, but I'm always happy when I hear other South Asians doing things in media, because there wasn't a lot of those faces when I was doing it, at least when I started out. So I'm happy for you and happy there's more of us out there.
Beautiful. I really appreciate you joining the show today. Before we get started, I have to ask, how have you been the last 6-7 months? I know we're living in this crazy world right now. What have you been doing to keep yourself busy? And overall, how's everything going?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for asking. Obviously I miss living in Canada. I've been gone from Canada now for 10 years, if you can believe it. I was born and raised, and I was born in Toronto. Then I grew up in Kingston area. We moved when I was very young. I was about 6. And then I went back to Toronto to Ryerson for radio and television arts. And then I worked at the Score and Bollywood Boulevard and an assortment of jobs before getting the job at ESPN. But, I always tell people my heart is always in Canada, and never more so than this last little stretch, because as we all know, Canada did a much better job handling the pandemic than America. It's not to say Canada's foolproof. I know the numbers are now going back up in Ontario, and it's concerning, and I get all that. But, listen, it's not even close how much better Canada did a job compared to America in managing the pandemic. So, listen, you asked how I'm doing. We're doing great. Thank you. We're all healthy. I've been very busy because I have 4 kids. My boys are 12, 9, 4, and 2. So the biggest challenge of the pandemic was how to keep those guys busy when there's nothing open. Right now, thankfully, with masks on, I can take them to a variety of Chuck E. Cheese. There's a Sky Zone, which is an indoor jump house. Parks, you don't understand, from March to June, for 3 months, nothing was open. So there's no Chuck E. Cheese. There's no indoor jump house. The weather stunk. It was raining most of April. I couldn't even take them swings and slides. That was the killer. I'm like, when you have kids one day, I'm guessing you don't have kids. When you have kids, you'll realize that if you can go to a park, that's huge. It just swings and slides, and we didn't even have that. We were deprived of so many things. So, listen, the good news is we are all healthy, and thank you. Right now, we're in good shape. My elder 2 boys are in school half days, which is not great. I'd like full days, but half days is not bad. They're good kids, and they get their stuff done when they're at home. And then my younger 2 guys are still in the process of taking naps here and there, which is why we're able to free up a few minutes right now. So I, like many, have been very busy with the whole concept of homeschooling, and thankfully sports returned in July. From March 12th to about July 8th, I did not go into the office at MLB Network from March 8th to July. So 4 months I was off from work. I did some work for DAZN for the NFL draft. I did that in my basement. I did some stuff for Sirius. I still have my podcast, which I've been doing regularly, the GM Shuffle, my NFL podcast, and Cinephile, my movie podcast, which you know. So I was still able to do those twice a week. But it was very odd not going to the studio, not putting a suit on, any of that stuff for 4 months. But thank God baseball came back and hockey came back. And those are the sports most important to me in my career. I'm obviously I'm obviously a basketball fan, and I obviously was happy to see basketball come back as well. But just from a strictly financial perspective, I needed to get baseball and hockey back, which they did. I need to have football continue, which it is, and thankfully my kids and my wife and I are all healthy. So I appreciate you asking. How have you guys been managing?
We've been doing our best as well. And like you mentioned, I feel like in Canada, we did get a better handle on things. But even with that, there's still so many things that are just out of the norm. And as you mentioned earlier, like even we have a local park near our house. Even they had like the little yellow tape around the slides, the swings. You can't go on there. Just gotta power through it, right? It's one of those things that's so unprecedented, and all we can really do is just, mask up, keep your distance, and just do your best to try to navigate through life.
Yeah, I mean, we're all in this together, so that's the upset of it. It's hard when there's only a small segment of the population being impacted, but literally the world is dealing with this. And listen, I'd love to go see my parents. They're still in Maple, Ontario.
Okay, yeah.
So I haven't seen them since January. Normally I go home to Canada at least in the summer for a week. They come visit us for a week, so haven't been able to do that, which I'm obviously bummed about. Hopefully, maybe in December I can go. Although I don't know. This second wave feels like it's going to hit. The numbers are rising, so. I'm grateful my parents are healthy, and I hope you and your loved ones are okay as well.
Well, I appreciate that, Adnan. Thank you so much. And I can just totally relate to your family situation because in my house, there's 4 boys as well. I have 3 brothers, so I totally understand about all of us just running around trying to keep each other busy when we were younger. So hang in there, my friend.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. It's funny, whenever I tell someone I have 4 kids, inevitably, if the person is non-South Asian, their eyes bulge out of their head. They're like, oh my God, you have 4 kids? Like, holy crap. Oh, I couldn't imagine. Oh, my college education. Oh, I have no life. You must be so busy. And anybody who's South Asian, if I say I have 4 kids, like, oh yeah, like, of course you do.
Yeah.
Like you said, you grew up one of 4. Like I always joke with people, we live 35 minutes outside Manhattan. I'm like, I never walk in New York City and see like a brown guy just casually walking up the street. Like he's got one kid he's hanging on to. He's pushing a stroller. The wife's pregnant. Like he's just hauling ass going up the street. Like it's never, brown families are never like one and done. Unless, unfortunately, God willing, if, things can happen as far as having more than one kid or even, but I'm telling you, brown families are like, oh, 4 kids at least. Like, I feel like that's, so I'm not surprised that you have one of 4 because I can imagine your mom kept trying to push for a girl
just didn't happen. But you know what? We treat her like her queen. So you know what? We give her that. Perfect.
Awesome.
So let's dive right in. My first exposure to your work, like many others, was back like in the early 2000s. My family had just immigrated to Canada from Pakistan, and here I am, 6, 7 years old, flipping through the channels and trying to find a cartoon. My brothers and I, we passed by this channel. It's called Omni TV. And for anyone listening outside of Canada, Omni TV is this news channel that it focuses a lot on multiculturalism, the arts and multiculturalism, especially in Canada. So we passed by this channel and we are like, whoa, 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 go back. We go back and we're just looking at the screen and we're like, this guy looks a lot like us. And at a time where early 2000s, representation's not really a thing, where you don't see other brown people on TV, it just sparked this instant connection. Can you talk about a little about your start in broadcasting and especially with representation at the time? What was it like back then, and what were some of the trials and tribulations you faced starting off?
Yeah, I appreciate saying that, Talal. I mean, I was very lucky. I went to school, like I said, for broadcasting. I wanted to work in sports, but I got turned down for a lot of jobs along the way. Like I said, I grew up in the Kingston area. I applied for a job in CKWS. I met with the station director. I did an audition, didn't get the job. I auditioned for a job in Sudbury. Met the guy, Mark Oldfield, nice guy. Did not get the job. It was down to me or 2 other candidates. And he said, we needed someone with experience. I had no experience, obviously, just out of school. I was working at TSN at the time, and so I was getting behind the scenes work, which is very, very beneficial to me, seeing how highlights are put together and working as a story editor, working with producers, and seeing how all the talent works. That was very helpful to me. I did that internship when I was at Ryerson when I was 19, and then I got the job. I worked the 3rd year and 4th year at Ryerson, and then I had a full-time job when I graduated. So it was great. I'm making 32 grand. I'm what's called the production assistant in America. It's an editorial assistant in Canada at EA. And I was watching the highlights, I put together highlights. I was learning a lot about sports television, but I wanted to be on air. So like I said, I got turned down for the Sudbury sports job, the Kingston sports job. I applied for a TVO kids host job, didn't get that. I applied for the Weather Channel, didn't get that. I applied for another job, so I can't remember. There was 5 at least that I got turned down for. Not to mention ones you don't even get an audition for. You just, send in the tape, you don't hear back. And then my dad happened to read in the Toronto Star there was an opening for a host at Omni, an interstitial host. And what that means is the person that does like these segments before like Letterman or whatever other shows they had on. So Lucy Zilio, who's fantastic and a wonderful person, she was the main interstitial host. So I went in there for the audition. I did one naturally about movies. I didn't get the interstitial host job. But the boss, Dan Popolka, said, I got an opening for a show called Bollywood Boulevard, if you're interested. And I said, sure. And I said, I don't really know much about Bollywood movies. Obviously, my family's Pakistani. My parents watched Bollywood movies. As a kid, I definitely watch Amitabh Bachchan. And, I would know some of the major stars, but I don't watch them consistently. And he goes, don't worry, you'll be fine. He goes, I already talked to some people at TSN. I got a little background on you. They all said you're smart and a good guy. And you'll pick it up. We have a producer who's actually from Mumbai. His name was Nalan Bakhle. He goes, Nalan will know all the movies. He'll help you out with pronunciations, etc. And I was with Monica, who was great. And so it was a really good crew that we had. And everybody was really friendly and welcoming. And I was working at TSN at the time. And then I was doing this show, and it was like $215 a week. And I was like, yeah, great. Like, when you're trying to get on air and it's taken 2 years to get on air, like you'll do it for 50 cents.
Right. Yeah. You'll do it for free even. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You'll do it for free. And so I was very lucky. It was literally once a week. I would literally go in one day and we would write some scripts and go over some show topics. And we go in and tape the show. So it was very light lifting. And like I said, I had great people around me. So I was very fortunate. And very quickly, within a month, they needed a host on another show called Omniculture. And Vac Verakaitis, who was a really smart guy, executive producer, he had worked at TSN. He knew a bunch of sports. He's a big sports guy himself. Remember, we'd always talk football. This was when Michael Vick was lighting up with the Falcons. Remember, we talk about Vick all the time. So Omniculture, I'm doing that show. It's on all the time. It's different communities. And then Nick Ciccione, who was the floor director at Bollywood Boulevard, says to me one day, like, what's your deal? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, I always see you watching sports. And I said, well, I want to be a sportscaster, but I didn't get the job anywhere. So this is the only on-air job I could get. And he said, well, I'll put in a word for you. My cousin Anthony, he runs Headline Sports, this new 24/7 sports channel. So Anthony calls me, and he had not seen Bollywood Boulevard, but he saw Omniculture because it was on Rogers 10 all the time. They would literally air that thing 6 times a day. So he was just flipping channels. He happened to see me, and he goes, listen, I think you're pretty raw. I think you need work, but Nick says you're a great guy. So let's keep in touch, and we'll see. I'm like, okay, great. And this was in December of 2002. I'd started Bollywood Boulevard in September of 2002. So it was 4 months in. And then 4 months later in April, Anthony called again, said, I saw you again. I think you've improved. I'd like to have you in for an audition. I'm like, sure. And then I got the job voicing highlights, as you know, with the score.
Yeah, I remember that.
Right. So you would be voicing highlights, and it was just your voice only, but it was great. Again, it was like $150 a shift for an 8-hour shift. I'm like, this is great. So now I've got Omniculture, I've got Bollywood Boulevard, and now I'm in at the score, voice only. But thankfully, finally doing sports, which is what I wanted to do. And shortly after that, Anthony said, hey, you know what? Maybe you could do some on-air stuff for us. I said, yeah, of course. That's the dream. I was doing horse racing updates. Eventually, I was doing some stuff, again, just filling in on the weekends. And then by the time we got to December, so now I got my start on TV September of 2002. I just turned 24. And then by December 2003, Anthony goes, and Dave Rutherford, who's invaluable, our news director, he said, listen, we got a lot of shifts for you because now I'm filling in quite a bit. Now I'm doing Omniculture, Bollywood Boulevard. I'm doing the score at least 3 days a week, maybe twice on air. And he said, if you quit, I'll get you a full-time job. And Anthony, to his credit, didn't get it right away. It was funny because I remember January thinking, I remember my brother said this to me. He's like, what if this guy gets hit by a bus? Like, he's offering you a full-time job. But, like, there's no verbiage. I'm like, you just quit your job. But I think it's a good lesson for you or for anybody. Like, if somebody gives you their word, generally you trust them. And Anthony and Dave were both very trustworthy. And I quit Omni in December. And January it didn't happen, but by February it did. Maybe it was even March. I think Anthony needed a couple of months just to get the books right. But he gave me a full-time job. And I remember I was 25 years old. And I was like, I got a full-time job doing sports at a national network. Like, I was happier than anybody alive. I was so thrilled and so grateful to Anthony and Dave, and still keep in touch with those guys. They were great bosses. And still keep in touch with the anchors. I was actually texting with Tim McAuliffe earlier today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Tim and Sid, yeah.
Tim and Sid, of course. Both great guys. We still keep in touch. Sid watches MLB Network quite a bit, so he'll text me when he sees me. Cabby's, of course, a close friend. We were friends from Ryerson before we even worked together. We've actually got the job at the score together. So I got to see the whole inception of Cabby in the Street. And He's doing great. He's in Vegas. I actually saw him last year. There was a big fight in Vegas for DAZN, so I went and saw him, and it was great to catch up. So all those guys at the score were invaluable. But you're right, none of it started without Omni. So everyone needs a break, and I'm grateful to everybody. Lydia Ferreira, Susie Suarez, they're great, great people there at Omni.
It's a great story, and just one about perseverance for anyone listening. Sometimes you may not have that person who believes in you, but you just got to power through, believe in yourself, and you get that one break, and you got to take advantage of it and make the most of it. Yeah, so that's very commendable that you took that Omni job and made it to where you are today. It's a really, truly inspiring story.
No, I appreciate it, man. Like the other day, I was talking to somebody who was looking for advice. And I said, listen, I don't really know in America how to get on TV. I can simply tell you my journey, which I just told you. I said, no, literally, my dad saw something in a newspaper. I auditioned for it. I applied for it. I got it. It led to one job, led to another. Like, this is generally how you hear things happen. And he said to me, this kid, he goes, do you think that a lot of your job or your career is because of luck? And I said, yeah, I think it's like 90%. But I do think of the expression that luck is opportunity meets hard work. So I think if you put in the hours and you're prepared and you're knowledgeable, you treat people well, then yes, opportunities come up and it feels like you just got lucky. And there's no question you need to have that in order to make things work. There are people I see who are very successful and just things just don't work out. Like, I don't know how you attribute that to anything, but God willing, alhamdulillah, things have worked out for me. And I'm grateful for the journey, man. It's been a lot of fun.
I'm going to transition a little bit more over to your love of cinema and movies. You host your own podcast, Cinephile with Adnan Virk. You can listen to that podcast on all your streaming services. So where does your passion for movies begin?
So again, my mom, this Pakistani parents, she didn't like anything with any sort of swearing or nudity or violence, but she loves movies.
Right.
So she'd say, let's watch a movie like on a Saturday night. So growing up in Canada, TVO used to always have Saturday night at the movies. They play a lot of great classic movies like Citizen Kane, Casablanca, that kind of thing. And I would go to the library. My dad is not an avid movie guy, but he's a huge reader. So he would take me to the library, and naturally, I would go to the library. There's a movie section there. And you could rent out VHS tapes at the time for like maybe 25 cents, 50 cents, something like that. And they had like literally the history of movies, like every great film you can imagine, whether it's Hitchcock or Orson Welles or Fellini or Kurosawa. So that really began, at this point I was about 15 or 16, I was in high school, and it really kind of helped accelerate my film education. Prior to that, obviously I loved Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, The Naked Gun, Back to the Future, comedies of the 80s and 90s. And I loved Pacino. And I saw Carlito's Way. I became a huge Pacino fan. Then I went back and saw The Godfathers and Serpico and Dog Day Afternoon. He very quickly became my favorite actor. And I loved De Niro as well because I adored Scorsese. So Goodfellas and Taxi Driver and Raging Bull. But I remember those visits to the library were very beneficial because I would pick up these movies. What I would do is I'd watch at least 3 movies of one director. And if I liked it, I'd see more. And if not, it's okay. Well, at least now I know what that person's about. So, for example, I'd look at Francois Truffaut, and I'd say, okay, he made Day for Night. Let me watch Day for Night. Okay, let me watch The 400 Blows. And then I'd watch Jules and Jim. I'm like, okay, well, there's 3 Truffaut movies, so I think I got a handle on him. Not really my thing, but at least now it's almost like you're adding to your film education. And in addition to watching movies, it's always important to read a lot of movies. And I just adored the work of Roger Ebert. So I would get those big Roger Ebert movie books, and I would read his reviews of the great movies of the past, but also current movies. And then, of course, I watched Siskel and Ebert. So I think the easy answer is my mom always loved movies, and that passed that love on to me. And in reason to find a movie together to watch, I would go to the library with my dad, and I'd find those movies. Hey, Mom, I found this black and white movie with Humphrey Bogart and James Cagney. It's called The Roaring Twenties. All right, let's watch it. So naturally, I loved all those gangster movies. So then that was very easy that I could watch Bogart and Cagney. And again, my mom, it didn't matter the subject matter. She just didn't like any violence or swearing or nudities, which, the Maltese Falcon doesn't have that, but it still's got that hard-boiled detective and the stuff that I enjoyed. So it was a win for both me and my mom. And my dad was happy. He would take me to the library. He would read his books. I'd pick up some movies, and I would also read movie and film criticism. And I just loved it. I just found that, it's one thing to watch a movie passively, but I found it actively engaging and watching it. And then more importantly, reading about it afterwards. Even the movies you don't like, you try to figure out what was the filmmaker trying to do, and the essence of the art, and what is good cinematography, and the use of sound design, and like very quickly I found out the filmmakers that I love the most: Scorsese, Spike Lee, Oliver Stone, Francis Ford Coppola, Sidney Lumet, and even filmmakers that I didn't necessarily cling to, like Spielberg's not a personal favorite, although I admit he's a genius. It's just his movies weren't necessarily something that I was drawn to, but I could watch Jaws and say, well, I can totally understand why this is a great movie, or why people love E.T. or Close Encounters. And then there's, the movies of his that I enjoy more, like Schindler's List or some of his more later day movies. But yeah, man, it all started as a kid and definitely into adolescence. And when I went to school, in many ways, I said, okay, I'm going to take radio and television arts. But Robert Altman, who's a great director, whose work I don't necessarily love, but I love the 70s movies. Easy Riders, Raging Bulls is one of my favorite books. And that talked about Scorsese, Spielberg, Lucas, Coppola, Altman, Billy Friedkin, all those directors in the 70s where they really had a lot of creative control. And I remember Altman started as a TV director and then moved to movies. So I kind of had a plan in my head. I was like, you know what? As son of Pakistani parents, I'm not going to be able to convince them I can go to film school. I'll go to school for radio and TV, which is broadcasting, and maybe I'll be a TV director and then become a movie director. And even when I was at TSN, I remember asking, like, I shadowed one of like the TV directors who was directing a Blue Jays game. Okay, how do you become a director? How can this happen? But my journey went in a different direction, and I was always better, I find, verbally rather than visually. Directors, you have to look at the world a certain visual way. And I just didn't have a very strong visual sense. As much as I love movies, I couldn't really create them the way that I'd like to. So I was very fortunate. I said, as long as I can be a sportscaster or a film critic, those are the two jobs that I most love to do. And thankfully, I'm able to do both.
That's great. So what would you say is the one single movie that you can either rewatch over and over again, or something that even if you're not the biggest fan of, that you just truly appreciate the filmmaking of it?
Yeah, so favorite movie, I get asked a lot. I always say it's a combination of these three. It's Goodfellas, Raging Bull, and Taxi Driver. So it has to be Scorsese and De Niro. I'll give the reasoning for each. Goodfellas is the one, in answer to your question, is the one that I can most compulsively watch. It's the movie I've definitely seen the most. I would say at least 25, 30 times. I mean, I could watch it once a week. So I just think the adrenaline of that film, the way it seduces you into being, wanting to be a gangster, and then it shows you the tragic undertows of it and why it's such a horrible existence. I just think it's a really a film that I think makes you almost fall in love, not only with gangsters, but also makes you fall in love with movie making, because Scorsese's film is just so, the use of the music and the camera work, and it's just constant nonstop, and the editing and the performances are so volcanic there, from Pesci and Liotta and De Niro. And like I said, the sequence where he's all strung out on coke and the whole world falls apart, like it's masterful when you watch it. It really makes, like I said, makes you fall in love with movies, along with being a fan of mob genres. I think Raging Bull, though, in many ways is Scorsese's best film, because I think he took a character who's so repellent and such an anti-hero, and yet he drew some sympathy for Jake LaMotta. He's an abusive person. He's repugnant in many ways, and yet somehow Scorsese and De Niro are able to see the humanity within him, which I think is a remarkable testament to how movies are very much about empathy. You don't have to like someone, but you have to kind of walk in their shoes a little bit, understand their psyche. And just the boxing scenes alone, I mean, the way he used the sound effects, it's so influential and so revolutionary. Even the opening sequence when he's using Mosconi and has De Niro shadow boxing, it's a beautiful way of showing what is often a very bloody sport. And then Taxi Driver, which I think is a great film for young men. And it's certainly the movie I remember in college. I must have watched it once a week. I think it's like the definitive film about loneliness and urban alienation. And I just sympathize so much with that character, Travis Bickle, especially, like I said, in the movie, he's 26. And I think generally young men in your 20s, I'm guessing you're in your 20s. I mean,
Yeah.
You watch Taxi Driver. Yeah, you watch Taxi Driver, and it's just got some sort of connection to young men about feeling kind of, like I said, disconnected from society. He's jilted by a woman, and he feels like he needs to find his purpose. He needs to find something in life. I just think that it's one of the greatest films ever, with a first-person narrator and the narration, the way it puts you into that world, and you just feel like you're in New York in the 70s, living in this hell. And I just thought De Niro's performance was so powerful, and Jodie Foster, and obviously Harvey Keitel. Albert Brooks lends the movie some really much-needed comic relief. So it's always one of those three. If you think of grand films, obviously The Godfather and Godfather Part 2 I love. I think Fargo is a really rewatchable movie. Glengarry Glen Ross is a movie I've seen a lot. Favorite comedies, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Naked Gun, Back to the Future. Those are movies that I love. If you want more highbrow comedies, I love The Royal Tenenbaums. I love Rushmore. Obviously, I like Wes Anderson's work a lot, especially his early movies. I think Being John Malkovich is brilliant. I love Adaptation. So those are generally the movies that I go towards. But like I said, it always leads back to De Niro, Scorsese, and Pacino. Whenever those movies of the 70s, when I watched Serpico the first time or Dog Day Afternoon the first time, I said, it just blew me away how great those movies are.
Well, that's a great list. On the last topic of movies, I have to ask you this because I know you're a big fan of this. Should there be an Oscars this year? A lot of movie purists are saying, you know what? There's still streaming. There's still movies being released on other avenues, not in the theaters. What's your point of view on this?
Listen, it's really been a tough time. There's a local neighborhood theater here 5 minutes away. They opened in September, and I went and saw Tenet there, and I wanted to go see another movie to support it. And then I just checked, and right now they've closed the theater down again. October 12th, they reclosed again. So it's heartbreaking to see, especially these local theaters. Obviously, AMC and those big movie theaters are in trouble. I know back home, obviously, Cineplex, Odeon, and all the rest of it. So it really upsets me, Talal, because I love going to the movies, and I love that feeling of shared community. But I understand people's aversion to it and why people are hesitant and scared, and totally get that. I did take my kids to go see The War with Grandpa because we love De Niro. And I believe their first De Niro movie they've all seen. Definitely the first one they've seen on the screen of De Niro. So we all went, we masked up, we didn't have any snacks. We did have popcorn, but we obviously socially distanced, pretty empty theater. But I understand people don't want to go, and it's up to each person's individual choice. So it does sadden me. People are not going to the movies as much, but I enjoy streaming like everyone else. So I just watched Borat and loved it and laughed a lot during it. I watched The Trial of Chicago 7, Aaron Sorkin's new movie on Netflix, had some mixed reviews on that. But I think the Oscars, the show must go on. And a lot of these movies are going to be available streaming. George Clooney's got a new movie coming out December 23rd. David Fincher has a film coming out early December on Netflix. So we're just going to have to adjust and just say, okay, a lot of these movies are going to be in streamers rather than in the theaters. But I think the Oscars should still happen. It's a sense of normalcy. And we're still going to see a lot of good movies come out. I think it's pretty lean year right now. Aside from Spike Lee's Da 5 Bloods and Andy Samberg in Palm Springs and now Borat, there hasn't really been a lot of really notable films.
Right.
I think November, December will give us more movies. And as you know, as a movie guy, the Oscars got pushed back from February to April anyway. So I think we're gonna get a lot of movies November, December, January, February, and March as far as like Oscar Canada type movies.
Perfect. As we wrap up here with Mr. Adnan Virk, it is now time for the final act. Mr. Virk, 60 seconds, 15 rapid fire questions. Are you up for the challenge?
I love it. Let's do it.
Movies or TV shows?
Movies.
Theater or watch at home?
Theater.
One sequel better than the original?
Godfather 2.
Best trilogy of all time?
Godfather or Back to the Future?
Should they reboot Back to the Future?
No.
Hollywood or Bollywood?
I'd love to say Bollywood, but it's Hollywood.
Go-to movie theater snacks. What's the one thing you always get?
I don't always get it anymore because I'm older now and I got to be careful with sugar. But Milk Duds. I love Milk Duds.
All right. Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad?
Breaking Bad.
Favorite comic book movie?
Batman.
Favorite sports movie of all time?
Raging Bull.
Favorite animated movie of all time?
Aladdin.
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
No.
Dodgers or the Rays?
Dodgers.
Describe movies in one word.
Empathy.
Bam. With 0.2 seconds left, Adnan Virk makes it through the final act. Adnan, where can we find you online?
You go to Adnan S. Virk, Adnan, S as in Sam, Virk. That's on Instagram and on Twitter as well. I'm so glad we got that done in 60 seconds. I thought you were going to tell me I still had 12 seconds to spare. So you got that right at the buzzer. Well done.
Buzzer beater. There we go. Adnan, thank you so much for being a guest on the show today. It truly means a lot. And thank you so much for paving the way for the next generation of South Asians in this medium. I truly appreciate all your contributions to this medium. And here's to the next 30, 40 years for many more great things to come.
Thanks so much, brother. I really appreciate the kind words. Best to you and your family, your three brothers. It reminds me, as you were saying that, I was with Cabby. We were on the road. We were working at the score, and he interviewed Charles Barkley. And as he was thanking him, Charles Barkley said, well, just so you know, I'm only doing this because you're black. So, Talal, I'm only doing this because you're brown. You're South Asian. I get a lot of, I'm not going to lie to you, I get people sliding into my DMs all the time. The fact you were South Asian and Canadian, I was not going to say no to you. So I love that you have such a passion for movies, as do I. And I feel bad. I should have said Bollywood. We love Priyanka Chopra, but I thought they still had to go with Hollywood. I mean, best Bollywood.
Don't worry, I'll edit that out.
Yeah, best Bollywood movie, by the way. I still love Dawn.
Oh, it's a great one.
Speaking of gangster movies, I think it's still on Netflix. It's definitely on a streaming service. I saw it the other day. I know they did a remake. I think Shah Rukh played, obviously, in the remake. But dude, Dawn is a great. I mean, I want to go back and watch Mahan at some point, which I loved as a kid. I haven't seen it in a long time. But classic Bollywood movies, dude, I'm with you. There's definitely something irresistible about them.
Well, thank you. And you know what? When the world opens up and things get better, I love to do this in person and, get that interaction and really dig deeper into your love of cinema.
I love it, Talal. Thanks so much, man. Best of luck to you, and I hope nothing but success for you and your family.